Testing, test mic. Gonna get started momentarily.
Patrick,
Oh, well, I was wondering where he is.
I got John Morris at the Cancer Center.
Stacy, you just let me know when we're ready to go. We're ready. Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our friends in the media. This is an exciting day for Peoria. Former U.S. Secretary of Transportation Ray LaHood and I are here to make a special announcement. We are joined by members of the Peoria Passenger Rail leadership team, a group that we assembled in August of 2021 to work to bring passenger rail service to Peoria. This group is composed of leaders in government, business, education, healthcare, labor, and communities. The group grew from 20 participants in 2021 to over 50 participants today. Communities all along our proposed rail corridor. We are joined by members of the Peoria City Council, our local government body that has been very supportive of this initiative from day one. We are joined by Mr. Daniel Bien, who is here representing Senator Durbin and Senator Duckworth. I'll make some brief comments, and then I'll turn it over to Secretary LaHood, who can talk as long as he wants. And then we'll turn it over to Mr. Bien to make some comments, and the other designated speakers who will introduce themselves and make brief comments. And then I'll come back up and provide a brief background presentation, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. That's the plan. So today, we are pleased, very, very pleased, to announce that the proposed Peoria passenger rail corridor between Peoria and Chicago, to and from, has been selected to participate in the Federal Railroad Administration's new corridor identification program. This new corridor identification program is a huge next step in bringing passenger rail service to and from Peoria. I'd like to briefly mention the milestones along the way. In 2021, IDOT, Illinois Department of Transportation, determined that the route that we proposed, this leadership team, is feasible and projected ridership is sufficient to warrant consideration for Illinois intercity rail passenger service. IDOT included this passenger rail service in the 2023 State Rail Plan. Feasibility study, inclusion in the State Rail Plan, huge milestones for us. Next, an economic development analysis determined that the project would support existing businesses and workforce needs, provide economic opportunity for residents, and bolster tourism. It may also catalyze transit-oriented development and additional regional investments. Next milestone, a bipartisan group of legislators at the local, state, and federal levels endorsed this project alongside top business, education, labor, and nonprofit leaders throughout the proposed corridor. And next, the City of Peoria, Peoria County, and other partners developed a grant application for the FRA's corridor identification program. We hired a consultant. All the partners put forth funding to pay for the development of the application. It was a huge project. It was a strong application, and we're excited today to announce that we've been accepted into the new corridor identification program, which is the pathway toward federally funded construction of our rail project. So what I'd like to do at this time is turn it over to Secretary LaHood. I'm sure he'll also talk about how this came about in terms of the bipartisan infrastructure funding, and then we'll hear from our other speakers, and I'll come back in a little bit. Secretary?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, first, let me just thank everybody gathered today for this announcement. We couldn't be here today without the collaboration of those gathered behind and those that weren't able to make it today. This is a corridor that involves many, many communities, not just Peoria and not just Chicago. It involves communities all along the corridor, including one of the most iconic places in Illinois, Starved Rock, where we know that many people traverse day in and day out, either from Chicago or from central Illinois. When President Biden came to office, he came with the idea that rail needed to be a significant part of the transportation system of America. And he knew it firsthand because during his time in the United States Senate, he would take the train from Wilmington, Delaware, his home, to Washington, D.C., and back in the evening so he could be with his family. And so he really, truly a train person, really a rail person. And during my time at DOT, I had the privilege of working with then Vice President Biden on a program to really develop high-speed rail, and there were some major announcements about that. But when the president became president, he decided he was going to pass the largest infrastructure bill in the history of America, $1 trillion bill. And a big part of that was going to be rail, not just highways, not just byways, but rail, and the development of rail. That's how this program really was started, in the sense that not just putting all the money into current Amtrak lines, which Amtrak needs the additional money, particularly along the Northeast Corridor and some of its other lines, but the idea that there are other places in the country that deserve and need passenger rail. And when Mayor Lee was running for mayor, one of her, I don't know if it was her top priority, but certainly one of her priorities was to get rail service from Peoria along the corridor to Chicago. And when you look at a map of Illinois, what you discover is Peoria, a community of our size, is the only community in Illinois that does not have rail service. You can go to Princeton, hop on a train and go to Chicago. You can go to Bloomington, hop on a train and go many different directions, but you can go to Chicago or St. Louis. You can go to Galesburg and get on a train. You can't do it in Peoria. And so I give the mayor a lot of credit. Once you win an election, you have to do what you told the people you're going to do, and she has. And almost right after her election, she and I spoke, and I offered to be helpful because obviously I love Peoria, and I love transportation, and living in a community that doesn't have passenger rail service did not suit me very well. And so the mayor and I put together an opportunity for all these folks behind us to join us on carrying out her vision. We knew that we needed this designation, though, or we would not be able to continue our efforts. Getting this designation means we are on the map, the rail passenger map at USDOT. They've not only awarded us a designation, they will provide $500,000 to help us with the planning for the corridor and what it will mean in terms of economic development and opportunities. This is not just a train that will deliver people from Peoria all along the corridor. This is an economic development project. At every one of these places, there'll have to be a train station. There'll be small businesses that will begin to open, which will mean jobs. The jobs that are created for the development of this corridor, in terms of fixing up the corridor, Again, enormous number of jobs all along the corridor. So this is not only a passenger rail opportunity for the citizens, this is an economic development opportunity for our state, for every one of these communities that's involved, and it really puts this part of Illinois on the map in terms of passenger rail. This announcement today gives us the momentum to keep going. It also gives us the resources to keep going, to continue the planning. So I'm delighted to be a part of the mayor's vision and the vision of all of these folks that are gathered here today, some of whom are going to speak. But this is a big deal for Peoria's opportunity to get passenger rail and to keep us in the game, put us on the map, and we gain enormous momentum today with this award from the US DOT for $500,000 and this corridor being on the corridor designation program.
Thank you, Secretary.
Yeah,
Thank
of
you.
course.
Next, we're going to hear from Daniel Bien, who represents Senators Durbin and Duckworth.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name's Daniel Bien. I'm an aide to Senator Durbin, and today I'm also with Senator Duckworth's office. It's a pleasure to be here. When I received this news yesterday, I was ecstatic, only because I was one of the few, or one of many people that filled out a survey a couple years ago indicating an interest in this corridor. And I'm glad to see it to fruition, but it doesn't stop here. Rail corridors are lifelines and links to communities around our state, and this is an investment. This federal funding will enhance and produce economic activity throughout these communities and the state. It is going to give greater accessibility to Illinoisans and a brighter connected future for our state. And it is a pleasure to be here once again and be a partner with our state and local stakeholders. And like I said, it doesn't stop here. It continues on. And this is just the first phase. But thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bien. Hey, Brent.
Good morning, Chris Brown, Mayor of Morris. Well, I couldn't be more thrilled to be here in Peoria today. When Mayor Lee called last night to give the great news to try to come down here, that was the first thing we did was clear the calendar and hurry up and head down this morning. So what this does for communities like Morris and Utica and LaSalle, Peru, I mean, just does a tremendous job for economic opportunity, for jobs for our region. And I mean, what a dynamic duo you got right here, right? You couldn't find a better group of people, and it's just been wonderful working with this group and getting to know everybody, working hard towards a goal, and we're getting there. So this is the first step, obviously, in probably many that we're going to have, but it couldn't be more of an exciting day for us, and we're just thrilled. So thank you for all your hard work and you do for this and the project and everything else. So thank you.
Good morning. Kevin Lindeman with the North Central Illinois Council of Governments. We're the regional planning agency in the northern area of the project. We're excited to be here. We were excited to get the call from the mayor last night of what this announcement means to the future of this project and to the region and our communities along the route. We're currently working on a study for where the rail depots will go along the northern route, so we're excited that'll be finished up in the spring and continue this process forward and see where this opportunities this project brings for our communities in the region. Thank you for having us here.
You're very welcome.
Good morning. I'm Kurt Beedai, Economic Development Director for the City of LaSalle. We are incredibly excited to be a part of this this expansion project and seeing the support that this project is getting. It's incredibly important to the smaller communities that are along this route that are going to see the benefits of the commuter rail with not only tourists and business leaders alike, but just the smaller community traffics that's going to bring to these smaller communities for the small businesses and the quality of life that will be impacted by the economics of all of this that's coming together to fruition. Where we are in LaSalle, it's a beautifully natural, scenic setting that is a crossroads of two national heritage areas, the Abraham Lincoln National Heritage Area, as well as the I&M Canal Heritage Area. So as you can see by the accreditation that Starved Rock has received in the past few years with 3 million visitors, this is from across the state. This is going to be something that will be very beneficial to those commuters who are visiting our area for those types of activities, and we are incredibly excited to be a part of this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Eric Miller, Executive Director of Tri-County Regional Planning Commission, Kevin's counterpart in the Peoria region. I just want to thank the leadership of Mayor Ali and Secretary LaHood for convening this powerhouse group and being persistent in the message and the mission and in getting to this point. We've still got a long ways to go, but it is going to be a journey worthwhile at the end. One of the things that we deal in the Regional Planning Commission with transportation planning is mobility and choice. We want to give people other options besides a car to get where they want to go in a safe, efficient manner. And this is truly a needed service for the residents all along the rail line to give them options and give them mobility choices to make their lives better. And obviously the economic development benefits speak for themselves, but this is really something of a basic service that we need to provide our citizens. Thank you for the opportunity to be a part of your team, Mayor.
Thank you very much. You know, I couldn't be more grateful to my partner, Secretary Ray LaHood, in joining me and others in this effort. And every single person that stands behind us has played a significant role in moving this project forward. There are others who are not here with us today who have also been very instrumental, and Secretary Omar Osman is one of those. He's not able to join us. He's the Illinois Secretary of Transportation, but he's unable to join us today because he has an important rail meeting in Chicago. His whole team has a meeting in Chicago today. Our state representatives who are part of this team were not able to join us today, but they've been significant supporters and drivers in this effort. We have Brad McMillan, who's representing Bradley University. We have Chairman Dillon representing the county, Administrator, was it Administrator Scott? Sorry, I just had a brain freeze here. Last name? Sorrell. Sorry about that. Administrator Scott Sorrell. Our city manager, Patrick Urick, has been very instrumental even in helping to put together that grant application. We have representing labor, Matt Bartolo, and we have our city council members back there, Councilmember Allen, Councilmember Vespa, Councilmember Graham, but the whole council has been very supportive. I want to acknowledge Andrea Kloppenstein. I hope I said that last name correct, but she's an engineer and has been part of the team and also part of the group that put together the application along with our consultant, Patrick Engineering. And we have Cindy Laus, of course, with your company, Hanson, but she also contracts and kind of works as a city employee a little bit. Hanson has been instrumental in being a partner in this effort and helping to put together and develop that application as well. So sorry, Mr. Sorrell, that I screwed up on your name. And of course, Scott, see, there I go again. Of course, Chris Setti, who's the CEO of our Economic Development Council, is here and has been very instrumental, just a great partner. I hope I didn't miss anybody. standing here with us. Who did I miss? Yeah, I said Councilman Graham. Yeah. Leave it to me to mess it up. But I'm very excited with the support that we have, the collaboration that we have. And I just want to very briefly share what happens next in this presentation. There's about 12 slides here that I'll go through fairly quickly. This is a briefing that was provided by representatives of DOT, US DOT with the Federal Railroad Administration. What happens next? Post-selections, next steps, and service development plan for the corridor identification program. So this shows the timeline that actually started in November of 2021 when the bill was enacted, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act was enacted. And it takes you through the timeline from that point up until the corridor was announced. You'll see number 5, it talks about late fall 2023. This is actually where we are right now. Selections into the corridor identification program are announced. What happens next? There are also selections in the Fed-State Partnership National Program being announced. And then from fall 2023 through fall 2024, corridors selected under the corridor identification program. And there were 12 corridors in Illinois that were selected. We complete step 1 and begin step 2. There's 3 steps in this corridor identification program. And then after your completion of those 3 steps, then the corridor is in the pipeline to receive full federal funding for construction of that corridor. So this is the Bipartisan Infrastructure Rail Development goals to modernize that northeast corridor to bring world-class passenger rail service to regions across the country, so that includes us, to grow a safer, cleaner, more equitable rail system and renew some of Amtrak's equipment and fleet. Basically to build the foundation for a long-term rail program. An overview of the program, and I'll just go down to those boxes there. They solicited proposals for the corridor ID program. They selected those proposals. This is what's happening currently. And then they're going to have partners with corridor sponsors to prepare what is called a service development plan. And that plan is something that we'll be working on. The SDP includes a project inventory, and the project inventories populate and prioritize the pipeline projects. So we are seeking to get in the pipeline projects. And then projects in the corridor identification pipeline are eligible for funding under FRA's financial assistance programs. So that's our goal. This is kind of the life cycle. It shows the corridor identification program. It involves project planning. It involves project development. Ultimately, we get to implementation, which is the final design, the construction, and the operation, actually bringing the service into service. This is establishing the program, significant policy positions. We are looking at number 2, where it says the corridor ID is home for all types of intercity passenger rail corridors. We are in that category called new service. So entirely new service, existing rail lines, or new service, new rail lines. The FRA received more than 90 eligible applications under the program. There were several that were not eligible. There were about 69 that were selected of the 90, and we're happy to be in that number. And then this is the information that you probably are interested in. What happens in steps 1, 2, and 3, and this graph kind of shows you where we are with step 1, the scoping. We will receive the $500,000 to assist with that. We don't have to have a match, 0 match. And then it describes the scope there, and then after the kickoff, we actually sign a contract or agreement with the FRA, and we get started on the work. Step 2 involves the service development plan, and that's where we develop SDP in accordance with the corridor statement of work. And then once we complete that, we move to step 3, which is preliminary engineering. Again, the service development plan does require a little bit of a match, 10%, and the step 3 requires a little bit higher match of 20%. So FRA will consider work that's undertaken to date. Mr. Manager might be able to give a little bit more information here, but we are either at A or we're at E on our way to C. Mr. Manager, you might.
So we're, depending on
You want to come up here?
So depending on the level of funding, we've done a little bit of feasibility work, but we have not started the environmental review that's really scheduled for step 3 in the process. So we're probably at this point in the area where we're moving on from A to B, where we'll have ongoing federal planning efforts in that step 1 of the ID program. Our intent is to obviously get to the point where we move to E, where we're operational.
Okay, thank you. And either that's the last slide or this is not working anymore. Is it the last slide? Okay. All right, so at this point, again, I want to thank everyone for the support and collaboration, and we can open up for any questions that you may have.
Yeah, I mean, so the $500,000, right, you said it's gonna be used for this, service development plan. How long will that money last? What happens if the money runs out?
So in step 1, the $500,000 is FRA funding to perform the initial planning work that will set the stage for step 2. And in step 2, we have to identify 10% of our match. That's where we'll go into more detailed planning work. What's the capital costs? What are the costs of fixing up the rail line? Where are the station locations going to be? And then ultimately, our goal is to be selected. Maybe if I could jump back. Our goal is at the bottom in the notes under step 2 in the service development plan. It says if the readiness criteria are met, capital projects identified in their service development plans may be advanced to step 3. So there's no guarantee that we're going to move into that step 3, but we want to certainly get to that point, and we're pretty confident. We've identified in our application that we have the local match kind of at least preliminarily identified for steps 2 and step 3 as well. So that was part of our application that we included.
Yeah, that local match, that 10% match and 20% match, I mean, where is that money?
Well, that money will have to come from the locals, and then as we move into step 3, that's probably at the point where we're going to hand this off to the state of Illinois, because ultimately, as you move in, since we're part of the state's rail plan, this is where it moves into being a larger state project. So, no guarantee at that point, but we identified within this that it's probably step 2 is probably going to be roughly $2 million, and that we would have to come up with a $200,000 match. Estimates that we put together.
What kind of hurdles still sit in the way of finally being able to say passenger rail is coming? What are things that Peoria have to show to get done before we can?
Well, I would say, and Secretary LaHood knows this very well, that there has to be some negotiation with some of the other rail service, the freight rail service. The freight rail lines own much of the lines, right? The freight rail service companies own the lines, so there has to be some negotiation. The good thing about being part of the corridor identification program is that we're going to have technical support from the FRA, from the federal government, and they're going to help with some of those negotiations and some of that assistance.
This project is not going to build new infrastructure. We're going to use existing infrastructure that's primarily used by the Class 1 freight rails. While I was at DOT from 09 to 13, we negotiated with Union Pacific to provide money for the corridor between Chicago and St. Louis, which stops in Joliet, Pontiac, Bloomington, Champaign, all the way to St. Louis. And we negotiated the idea that we're willing to put money in to fix up the infrastructure to get trains to go faster. That was the idea on that corridor. And the negotiations involve the shared use of the track. And that's what we'll have to be doing with this. We've identified a corridor, and a lot of the corridor is currently being used by the freight rails, so there'll have to be some negotiations and some agreements reached for the use of that shared track, and also who's going to pay for fixing up the track and the infrastructure. Amtrak will be the operator of this corridor, like they are in every other place in Illinois. And the state of Illinois has a great relationship with Amtrak. And we have the support of Secretary Osmond and Governor Pritzker for this project. They submitted a letter of support with our application for this corridor designation, and we assume they'll be full partners with us when it comes time to figuring out the operations and what it'll cost and so forth.
As far as determining where the station will be, I know we have a couple sites selected, but kind of when will we see the final decision made there, and what's going to go into that decision on deciding which site is?
Sure. There was a study done, and it was paid for by Tri-County Regional Planning. And Mr. Miller, you want to talk about that, or Cindy? How about Cindy Laus? Yes.
Yes,
Identify yourself.
Cindy Lose from Hanson Professional Services. We looked at the different station locations and identified 2 locations, one near the Gateway Building and one over near the post office. And so I think as we move into the next steps and refine, we will look at those a little closer with the city and with the property owners adjacent to help refine that. At this point, it could be either, but we'll have to work towards what that will be.
We're very interested in downtown station.
The answer is through negotiations they do. The first meeting, they're not going to come up and say, oh yeah, we're willing to turn over all of our tracks in the interest of passenger rail. They have big responsibilities for delivering freight all over the state of Illinois. And if you look at other Amtrak passenger rail service, you can talk to the folks that have negotiated with these freight rails. It's a complicated process, and it's not going to happen overnight.
I was waiting for that question. We honestly can't say. Bloomington Normal, the Normal station, took a total, Mayor Coos said, from beginning to the end, it took them 7 years. They got a Tiger grant, but it's been a game changer for that area in terms of economic development and so forth. So we've always said we expected that it could take as much as 10 years for this to actually happen. But again, it took this next step to begin to move forward. So I'm still very optimistic, around that 7 to 10 year timeline.
Let me just tell you my own experience. When President Obama included $48 billion in the economic stimulus bill in 2009 that Congress passed, DOT got $48 billion. $8 billion was for high-speed rail. At that point, Governor Brown was governor of California, and he wanted to implement a high-speed rail program. So we gave, over a period of a couple of years, we gave California $5 billion. The Biden administration just announced $3 billion more for that project. So that project was started in 2010, and here we are, 2023. These projects take a long time. You have to go through a lot of communities, and you have to get the support of people, and they're enormously expensive. And So we're not fooling ourselves to think that people are going to be riding trains in the near term. I think the mayor is right. I think 10 years is probably the time when people will board trains in Peoria or Morris or Utica or Starved Rock and Chicago to come our direction. This is a big project. It's expensive, and it'll take some time. But these things don't happen unless you have people who have a vision. And all of the people that are gathered behind us here have a vision.
So I have a question about the communities that, this passed through. What is kind of, as we move into, and when and if we move into these later steps, what is the level of buy-in required from them? I guess, when we get to 10% match, 20% match, are those things that Peoria is mostly going to be on the hook for, or will other communities along the railway be a part of that as well?
They've been a full partner along the way. We had to put up $250,000 for the development of the grant through the consultant, and every community stepped up. I think the city, what was the city's amount? 100 or 50? 75? $100,000 the city, but the county put up 50, and then the other counties, each of them, cities or counties, put up somewhere around $25,000. So
Mayor Brown, maybe you want to comment on. Let's let the mayor of Morris say a word about an answer to his question.
Sure. So, plain and simple, we're fully on board. We have been from the beginning. We're doing studies right now of where our spot will be located if a depot is going to be right there downtown for us, which would be a huge impact for our downtown area. So we are fully on board, 150% support this project. And we've been in monetarily, in participation, and calls, from the get-go. So, and everyone behind us has done the same. So we are fully in support and on board and will be.
thank you. So this was a local project that became a regional project, that became a state project, and now it's a federal project, a federally funded project that's part of this national DOT, Federal Railroad Administration corridor identification program. That's a big deal. That's a huge next step for us.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on what I already mentioned, because a couple numbers got thrown out, so I just wanted to get a total number of how much money has been invested in this project so far by the city as well as the surrounding communities.
So the application, we spent about $200,000 applying for this. That was the work that we did. IDOT paid for the feasibility study that was completed and wrapped up before we started to file for this application. And then obviously we'll work with our partners to discuss the local match and in terms of where we would go with that. But at least the initial step, the city has identified that they could fund that, but we'll certainly have the conversation to build buy-in with the rest of the communities.
Are there going to be any other feasibility studies done down the line to kind of gauge?
Step one is funded 100%. Step two would be scoped out in step one, and that's when we would have the 10% match. If we're then selected for step three, it's a 20% match. That's the path that we're following. It's in our capital budget. We've identified and budgeted there.
There was another $80,000 that was put forth by Tri-County Regional Planning Commission that provided the study for where a station would actually be in the Peoria, city of Peoria, yes. And from what I read in terms of the briefing from DOT, FRA, is that once you're in the corridor, once you complete a step, you move to the next step. So it's a matter of not necessarily being selected, but completing your step so that you can move to the next step.
Sure, so I guess maybe just taking a step back a little bit, so I mean, steps and what was it like to, you got that phone call, and they were, like,
Exhilarating. Very exhilarating, very exciting, very much a relief, because we knew this was a requirement for us to be able to move forward. So we're just, very relieved and very excited and very optimistic.
Were there any specific qualities about Peoria that were mentioned that, they selected, the reasons why they selected Peoria?
We met the criteria. They don't usually do that in terms of, it's a very competitive process. You have to meet all the criteria. You have to stand out. And I would say our application certainly stood out. And to be selected, out of, I think 69 corridors were selected out of over 90 applications nationwide.
I think the defining factor perhaps is the fact that a community the size of Peoria doesn't have rail service, and every other community, some smaller, have rail service. That's number one. Number two, as the mayor said, when we called the governor's office to see if Governor Pritzker would support this, or the Secretary of Transportation, they were on board. When we talked to Amtrak, they were on board. They recognize a city the size of Peoria deserves passenger rail. And we had a study in our hand that said the ridership would be substantial. And that was an independent study that showed that people will ride these trains. And so I think we've made a good case just on the fact that Peoria's been left out.
And the Secretary's right. We weren't a cold applicant. We had met with the FRA team. We had met with the Amtrak team prior to even putting in an application. We were encouraged to apply. It seemed that we were a good fit to apply. And I thank Secretary LaHood for opening those doors to be able to have those meetings that took place over a year ago.
Doesn't it seem a little odd that the former Secretary of Transportation and the current Illinois Secretary of Transportation live in a community that doesn't have passenger rail service? That's how we felt about it.
Good point. And I have a train to catch today. Any other questions? Are we good, Stacy? Okay.
You mentioned downtown as a sort of preferable target for where the station is going to be. And revitalization of downtown Peoria is a conversation that comes up again and again and again in city discussions. What do you believe the station does for downtown Peoria in operating a train station?
Yeah, so transportation is very important to economic development. Within our new strategic plan that's been approved by Peoria City Council, and Councilman Greb is also the District 2 councilman, which includes downtown, not a reimagining, but development of downtown is one of our 6 top priorities over the next 5 years. So we know that a thriving downtown means a thriving city. So I think having more people coming in and out of our community, from those communities up north, and there's connections to Chicago all over the nation. So Chicago is a major Amtrak hub. That can potentially bring more visitors, tourism, and business right here to Peoria. So being downtown, I think, is convenient, accessible, and just the right place to be.
Let me give you an illustration. When I was secretary, I met with Mayor Ardis, and I said to him, let's take an opportunity here while I'm in a position to help the community. And he proposed the idea of a Tiger Grant, which were grants that we had available to cities where they couldn't find the money anywhere else. And he said, why don't we redo what is commonly referred to as Washington Street? And I didn't think much of the idea, but his vision was, if you redo that infrastructure, it will be attraction. And what happened? We now have the warehouse district with new restaurants, with young people moving into condos and apartments. And look, if you build it, they will come. If there's a train from Peoria going through Utica and Morris and LaSalle, Peru and Starved Rock and Chicago, people will use it. All you have to do is ask the mayor of Normal or the mayor of Bloomington, or go up to Princeton, where from time to time when I'm going to Chicago, I take that train. There are a lot of people from Peoria up there boarding that train. And let me give you one other example. There's a train that opened, it's called Brightline. It opened between Miami and Orlando. It's well oversubscribed. They've had to add trains. It just opened about 3 months ago, and it's enormously popular. Why? Because people don't want to get on the lousy interstates that are full of trucks, and they want a comfortable ride. And to my point, if you build it, they will come. The Tiger Grant for Washington Street, the idea that you provide citizens with good transportation, they'll take advantage of it.
Thank you. That concludes our press conference. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all for coming.